Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunrise. It is this Monday morning. I'm Chamberlain. So,
well, I'm going to have a very strange greeting. Happy pre-Independence Day. Is there any such thing? Well, if you do...
What does that even mean?
It is what it is. Happy pre-Independence Day. Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Maupo.
That might as well be happy post. Since there's pre.
I'm really trying from our greeting. I'm just trying to imagine how it was on September 30, 1960. I mean, what it was for all those people who were. Anyway, today is the last day in the month of September. Good morning and welcome. I'm Ayo Akande.
You forgot to tell us how the streets of Lagos were in that 1960. If I. Yeah, I'll take a look at this sprawling city, Kano city. So it's a business sprawling area. So yeah, I might also just let you have that at least before. I mean, on this pre-Independence Day. So latching on to the greeting. It's the day before, and I just asked myself, so. Every Independence Day, we see people with flags, so selling them and doing all of those things. Anyway, we'll see what happens when we come to all of that. But yes, indeed, it's one of those locations and localities that you just look to see what incidentally, the business environment these days, we could use a lot of economic help, economic policies that will let the private sector thrive, and not just government agencies making more money at the expense of the populace.
You certainly cannot ignore the sprawling city of Kano. I mean, a lot of people argue that Kano is to the north what Lagos is to the south. And this is basically what you're seeing. For some strange reason, Chamberlain, I still haven't managed to visit Kano. And I believe that, yes, sadly, I mean, every single time I have planned to make a visit, either officially or personally, something comes up. And I don't know why my travel or my trip to Kano has been jinxed. But I believe that very soon, you know, that jinx will be broken.
Yes.
But this is certainly something to admire. For those who haven't been to Kano and who think that, you know, the country ends in their backyard, you can take a look at this visual and know why it is that the figures of population when it comes to Kano and Lagos are always controversial. You know, then you begin to hear, no, people who live in Kano are more than the people who live in Lagos, and, you know, vice versa, the controversy. I think since the 2006 census, we have been at it. I think it's not been accepted, though, if we're to go by INEC's voters register, that the population of Lagos, at least the voter register.
Some people's mood this morning. Calling
that the voting population in Lagos is now more than the voting population in Kano. But I do know that for economic reasons, you cannot ignore Kano. For political reasons, you cannot ignore Kano. And Kano has proven over and over again that it is a city that will not be ignored in any of the issues, you know, important issues when it comes to this country. A melting pot, you can argue, and a city not shy of controversy. Only recently we had this controversy around two emirs. I think that that has been resolved now largely, and I think that there's been some peace restored to the city and settlement. But is a city to certainly keep an eye on. Ayo, what do you think?
Absolutely, particularly the business part of it. And, you know, there's this part of business, since that's what Chamberlain is interested in this morning. The leather industry is what is known as a multi-million-dollar poor leather factory, leather industry, and it is all in Nigeria. And there are those who will say that Kano is the headquarters of that tannery, of this leather business, the tannery business, because it gets to that particular level, and then some people take it out of the country, and before you know what is happening, it comes back in what they call imported leather. Let me not mention the name of any country. It's made in Nigeria anyway. But you know, the fact that this is an ancient city is something to celebrate. And I'm very sure that if we go to different parts of the state, this city in particular, we will see those monuments that still stand Kano out. And don't worry, Markwe. I see a knock on your door, maybe from the state government, to invite you officially to the city of Kano.
I got one once, it was jinxed.
So, don't, how do they say? Don't count your chicks
before they're hatched.
Okay. So, look at this. Which one is the official one? Which one is which? Because now people buy both and it just appears as though they are okay with both. It looks as if one appeals to them visually and the other probably not. So, which one is it? I mean, some people are buying this one this morning while others think this one maybe so. Can we make up our minds? Which one is the real one?
I think we just need a bit of education. The flag of Nigeria, as we go into Independence Day, I mean, Independence Day is tomorrow, and tomorrow, you know, you're going to have, okay, well, I don't know whether they still do that practice, children lining the streets and holding flags of the country. You have these little flags already being sold on the streets in many places, maybe in some shops as well, bookshops, etc. And what you'll always find is this one with the coat of arms in the middle. That's not the Nigerian flag. I mean, last year we raised this with the NOA, and they promised to do something about it, to, you know, to correct the anomaly, because they're not, I don't think they're in charge of printing, but according to them, they have the right flag, which is just plain green, white, green, no coat of arms in the middle. I mean, I don't know where that came from. Maybe it was to give it the stamp of authority. I don't know. Maybe we just like extras, and we just thought maybe, and it didn't help that a lot of public office holders did not know the difference. So you go to the office of even some governors, you go to the office of House of Reps members, senators, and you see them with flags that have coat of arms in the middle. Sure. That is not the Nigerian flag by all means. Your Excellencies, distinguished senators, House, honorable members of the House of Reps, House of Assemblies, you know, please do educate, join in the education of your colleagues, join in the education of your friends, join in the education of the upcoming generation that the Nigerian flag is the plain, can we show the correct one, please? The plain gray, white, green flag, no coat of arms in the middle, no frills, nothing. It's just green, white, and green, okay? And I'm hoping that the NOA, they've been doing some work in recent times, you know, trying to get us in the mood, you know, in the celebratory mood of this independence. And I see we've been saying their jingles, so that's certainly something to commend. I also hope that they will take this one on board, especially in schools where a lot of these little flags might be purchased ahead of Independence Day or post-Independence Day. They need to know that those are not, I would have bought one this morning, but I said, no, I'm not going to waste my money buying something that is wrong because I want to educate people. I just think that we can show it and, you know, we can tell you that this is the right flag. The green, white, green you see right beside me, that is the proper Nigerian flag. If you cannot get it to buy, please make it. It won't cost so much to make, all right?
I know people are wondering, celebrate?
Yeah, celebrate.
What did they celebrate?
Celebrate.
What is there to celebrate?
We will the fact that we're still together as a country, don't take that for granted. Don't you ever take that for granted. Some people fought to keep us where we are so that we can continue to answer that name Nigeria. Let us never take their sacrifices for granted. It might not be where we want to be, and yes, we might be disappointed with the economy and we're struggling, but let's not forget to count our little blessings, okay?
So the thing now is this. Even if you think you don't want to celebrate because of one reason, at least you're alive. At least, you know, you're doing...
It's a little more than that, Chamberlain.
Really?
Hopelessness?
Yeah.
No, you know you can't afford that.
It's depression? A little more than that.
That shouldn't be even mentioned. That should be far away from you. So let's talk about what to expect much later today. I think it's going to be a big day for a lot of lawyers. They're going to be addressed as Leonard Silk sooner rather than later. A lot of them are going to be, they'll join our club.
But yes, certainly we have something to celebrate.
But yeah, well, yeah, something to celebrate. But I don't know what reverse people will celebrate this morning when this judgment is handed down today. It has to do with the forthcoming local government elections in October 5. So yes, there was a judgment that was handed down in Rivers not long ago at the Rivers about the Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission, asking them to use the register, the authentic register. Well, I don't know if they use the word authentic, but there's one before the judge this morning at the Federal High Court here in Abuja. So they're all just there. So we're waiting to see what happens, where will the pendulum swing on that one. At the end of the day, everyone wants peace when that local government elections hold. So above all else, when that comes through, we keep tabs on that one.
I think Ayo has what's coming up on business.
Oh, yes. Business Morning on Sunrise Daily this morning, by the way, will be hosted by Eladi Williams, and that's the focus today. Naira and stock performance Q3. Stock market Q3 performance. We'll be talking about that one on Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. Meantime, let's take a look at some of the issues from the papers today. Sundry headlines hug the front pages of the dailies this morning. Let's begin with the Guardian newspaper. Only 7 of 20 subsidiaries viable as NNPCL battles 22 trillion Naira debt. That story has its details on the inside pages, but the infographics on the front page gives you an idea. Look at the front page of the Daily Independent. Naira devaluation floating put FG's $1 trillion economy target at risk. And the details continue on the inside pages. The Abuja Inquirer, Nigeria at 64. No cheers, only despair, according to Nigerians. FG Murik warned against protests. No going back, says organizers. And the details of that continue on the inside pages. The Nigerian News Direct has FG delivers 64 CNG buses to labor student leaders amid rising fuel prices. Tinubu reiterates commitment to easing cost of living as unions express growing frustration over fuel hikes. That story is on page 2. Front page of This Nigeria. Hard times, parents groan over rising school fees, transport. Seek loans, help from religious bodies to meet obligations. Pressure shifts to public schools. Story is on page 2. The Nigerian Tribune has state creation, police top agenda as senators begin retreat on new constitution. State police in line with global practice, those against it are playing the ostrich. From Senate, that's according to Senate leader. Southeast, South senators demand new states. Look at the front page of Daily Trust. Residents NAF disagree as airstrike kills scores in Kaduna. 23 worshippers among victims, according to locals. We only hit terrorists' base, that's from the Air Force. State government silent. But the front page picture you see right there is from Beirut in Lebanon. Find the details right there on the front page. Blueprint newspaper. FG hands over 64 CNG buses to NLC, TUC, NANS to distribute 2,000 CNG tricycles to youth. It's a promise kept, says Information Minister. Details continue on page 6. The Daily Times has more than 40% of Nigerians now enjoy 20 hours of power supply daily. That's from Adelabu. Credits achievements in power sector to radical, bold steps taken by Tinubu's administration. The story has details on page 2. The Leadership newspaper has October 1 protest. Hold dialogue with protesters now. CSOs tell Tinubu. Stories on page 4. Varsity students oppose plan. Police assure of adequate security. FG distributes 64 CNG buses to workers, students. New Telegraph has tale of unfulfilled dreams at 64. How poor leadership, faulty structure, others slowed Nigeria's growth. And look at the front page. And look at the riders right there. Okorie, Shetima, Ezugwu decry missed opportunities. Sanwo-Olu, Mba, Oborevori, Aliyah, focus on rebuilding nation. Nigeria's brightest days ahead. That's from Akpabio. Find the details of that story. Continue on the inside pages of the paper. Business Day. Why CBN is losing battle to stabilize Naira. Find the details on the front page, continues on the inside pages of the paper today. Look at the front page of the Vanguard newspaper, October 1. Police deploy in states as organizers insist on protest. And look at the riders. Government failed to address protesters' demands as from Adeji Adeyanju hopes more detained protesters will be released today. Refrain from any acts of violence as from the federal government. Give FG more time to fix economy, according to Kogi Police. Restriction of protests to 2 designated venues still stands, as from the Lagos State government. CP Lagos meet organizers assures on security, professionalism. Jigar Police deployment today. Don't join any protest, now tells varsity students. Find details of that story on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper today. And these are the papers we have for you today.
Well, there's certainly a lot to take in as we, look to October the 1st. I mean, you can see the papers clearly reflecting the stories already around October 1 and how a lot of Nigerians truly feel as we approach October 1. And, you cannot blame people. You cannot put down their feelings. Their feelings are genuine and they're valid. I mean, how do you ignore a story? Hard times, parents groan over rise in school fees, transport, seek loans for help from religious bodies to meet obligations. You have this one from a New Telegraph, tale of unfulfilled dreams at 64, how poor leadership, faulty structure, others slowed Nigeria's growth. So all of these stories are already there, and frankly, they're beginning to turn into a litany of woes. And I think that the older you get, the more susceptible you are to losing hope in this country. But truth is, I mean, I have also I've asked myself that very critical question. On my way to work this morning, I was just driving and I was thinking about what my real thoughts were for Nigeria at 64. And I was asking myself, have I seen this country in a worse shape than it currently is today? The answer for me is yes, I have. I've lived through 25 years of Nigeria's democracy, in the Fourth Republic, and I've also had the opportunity of living at least 15 years in our military rule. And I know that things have been pretty bad, economically speaking. It will be arguable. I mean, there are those who had it good in the military era. There are those who argue that they had it better. They will even tell you that the era of Sani Abacha was better than this.
I would have thought.
Exactly. I beg to disagree. I mean, because when people felt what they felt, it was a time when Nigerians resorted to using sawdust to cook. I still remember that. I know where I lived in that particular time. And I know that they named that sawdust Abacha stove. That was what it was called in the places where it was used. So, and what was people couldn't voice their discontent. So these are the thoughts. I was asking myself, my hope as a young person grew that this country was going to be better. There have been times when I have been very depressed about the state of things. There are times when I lose hope. But then I look at the fact that now I have children. And interestingly, the children today are celebrating Independence Day a day ahead of Independence Day because they won't be in school. So their schools, a number of schools, I'm sure a number of parents have had to do this now, have had to dress up their children in maybe traditional outfits or some celebratory outfits and give them flags and cook some food, and take them to school. The question is, what am I going to give to my children? Am I going to sell them the same hopelessness that is prevailing in the air? Rightfully so, don't get me twisted. You cannot sell hope where there is none, but that you can actually make them look forward to something. It will be grossly unfair to tell children that there is no hope, or to say that there is nothing to look forward to. I think that what we can do right now is, pick up ourselves by the bootstraps. And I know that this is something that leaders should be doing at their level. We should begin getting this sort of pep talk from I'm sure we'll be getting it tomorrow from the president. But even as, individuals and leaders in our various spheres, we need to give ourselves, moments to really think about what it is that we're sending. Because if we do not, find a way to raise the hope of young people who really still have the energy and the vigor and, you know, have their lives ahead of them. I still have my life ahead of me. I'm still a young person, but I know now that that is relative. So, I mean, I'm not a spring chicken, but I also know that I have a duty to inspire hope in the future, to say, look, I'm doing what I can each day to make this country a better place. I want to believe that the next person beside me is going to do the same thing. And there have been many moments where we see young people do that. We see it in the Olympics, people who have gone to compete, regardless of whether they've been sponsored by Nigeria or not. Just for them to be able to wear that Nigerian flag is enough for them. So if those people are putting their all, regardless of what it is as it's pushing them, just having the platform to be able to compete with or compete on, then what exactly will be our own excuse not to put in our best? So I would go with this particular headline on the front page of this Nigeria. Let's not lose hope. Our brightest days are still ahead of us.
You know, while all of that may be the case, it's somewhat challenging, but at the same time, it's hugely important as well for us to highlight this part. If you look at the bottom of the front page of Daily Trust, where they were talking about heart diseases spiking in the country. And then they were talking about the prevalence of all of that. And so there are several factors. These days, people don't even know because, I mean, how are they supposed to know?
Stress.
Yeah, and then this other part, genetically modified foods. They're all over the place, but people don't know because they're not labeled. You just see them and you think that it's the usual one. And so the authorities there need to do a lot more so that people can have a choice. In other climes where this is, it's clearly labeled. They dare not label them, but here it's as if you have no choice. That's just it. Go ahead with it. And so they're talking about how it has spiked. And so almost, I think they say if they were to put a figure to it, it will be almost like 1 million every year are susceptible to these kind of stuff. The front page of Daily Trust at the bottom strip, you see all of that there, where it's of huge concern, and we need to pay attention to that as well. Ayo.
I was having this conversation on lifestyle, and we were talking about, and someone was telling us that, you know, people who are susceptible to depression and high blood pressure, their ages are as low as 10. So these things that you're mentioning could just as well be part of the reason. And they're saying that it's no longer a disease for the aged, but even young people now are susceptible. This could be part of the reason. But, you know, I would go with the front page of this Nigerian newspaper that Mark talked about, and particularly because of the independent nature of it. The writer that says that the pressure is now on public schools. Question is, what are we teaching the children? Pressure shifts to public schools. So more and more people should be able to go to public schools now. Fine. There was a time when the rise in the price of school fees chased some people to take their children to public schools. And what would it do? It will help them to also contribute to developing those schools, those public schools, so that their children, so that it looks befitting for their children. And I think it is one way that we should even consider. Now, that's on the one hand. On the other hand is, what are we teaching them? Back when I was growing up, we had subjects like moral instructions, like civic education. I'm not sure how much of those things are there now. What we teach children in schools now is security. What exactly are we telling them by that? I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's not wrong to teach them about security. But how about patriotism? In what ways are we teaching our children about patriotism? We are telling them to wear traditional wears to school and all of those things, and that's amazing. But then, that's the dress. What are we telling them? And what's the hope that they have for the future of this country? Oh, definitely there is hope for this country. Several people have said several things over the years, even since as far back as the 60s, 50s, that Nigeria is going to rise out of this murk that we're in. There will come a time when we'll be known for corruption. That time is now. But there is also a time when we will be known for doing the right things, and that time is coming. But where will you be when that time comes? So what are we teaching the children? That's one. Secondly, let's not forget that it's the young people that hold the hope for this nation. What we plant into them is what we will reap. That's my take this morning, Chamberlain.
All right, so thank you. We're back in just a moment. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, Mr. Adeni Kano joins us this morning virtually from beyond the shores of this country in the States. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. It's a pleasure being here again.
Yeah,
and,
so...
as you said earlier, happy pre-independence. That's what you said.
I was asking myself, wait. I never even had time to process that. Happy pre-independence. Okay, there's during, there's post. What am I supposed to do? All the pre, during, post. Okay, well, this is the very week where, and they've started the law already. The ministers did speak to the nation on Friday about what they're doing, how they think that something is being done. This was after I think they had been given the marching orders anyways, because people thought, oh, would it be because there's supposed to be a cabinet reshuffle, so everybody has that marching order, go out there and speak. But you tell us, it's the 64th Independence Day celebration. So what comes to your memory when you even hear that, I mean, compared to the days previously? So how does that play out mentally for you?
Well, I think I'm grown enough to be able to speak about the country and the, very many documented experiences between the military and the civilian regimes that I've witnessed since I realized that I'm a citizen of this country. And whenever we talk about, the togetherness of a nation, we give consideration first to the reasons why we should say thank you. Many have died, but we're still grateful that as a country, we're still together. Because I can't imagine Nigeria having the number of refugees that people would normally have when there's an outbreak of war. So is there a reason to be grateful? I say first, yes, there's a reason to be grateful because we're still together as a country. Then another layer for me to be able to say thank you is that we've had about 25 years of unbroken democracy. That in itself is indicative of the kind of growth or the journey towards growth that we've made about a quarter of a century. But in the course of realizing all of these positives, would we have been better as a country with regard to the kind of pace that we give to the positive that we would have been able to account for? I can say yes. And those positives, we still have the capacity to exhibit, but are we really ready? Because when we talk about the leadership of a nation, oftentimes we do not give consideration to the kind of assessment we normally give to ourselves when we find ourselves within organizations where we work. So if I decide to use the key performance index approach to doing an assessment, and I've said all of the speeches and statements made by the people who perhaps have been working with the president for over a year, going to 2 now, may not be so much as something that I want to talk about because many will fall short. So let's first of all look at the primary ingredients that is expected of the average person, and that would be competence. Competence has 2 levels, Chamberlain. Competence with regard to the kind of education you get, that makes us give consideration to your primary consideration for a role. Then competence is also tested and confirmed by virtue of how you do with regard to your terms of reference. So we find out that in certain instances, the paper qualification of those that are members of the cabinet of the president can be applauded. But with regard to the deployment of those knowledge resources as applied with, when it has to do with solving the problems of their respective ministries, I have to say that it is gross incompetence. And I think that that is where we will begin this conversation. Whilst we are happy to be together, while we applaud the fact that our democracy is not broken, but what about the key index? So because of that, I'd like to just raise an issue here with regard to key areas that may be important for us to chew upon in this conversation. Let's look at the cash cow of the country, and that is the petroleum sector of Nigeria. I do not know if you've observed that repeatedly the likes of Kyari have actually taken a lot of Nigerians as idiots. I'm very sorry, but I have to choose that word. I'm not using it for anybody. I'm just describing how we appear to him, because he's communicated repeatedly to us about how the petroleum sector of the country will have some kind of reprieve. When this administration came to power, it was about 187. It moved from 187 to 700. Right now, the money paid per liter for petroleum product is about 1,000 plus. And that itself may be as much as 2,000 in some part of this country. So that is number one part of this consideration. So when I look at the competence level of Kyari and how he has repeatedly insulted the intelligence of Nigerians, I say that that ministry falls short. Then at the same time, I want to call to question the fact that you have a sector that is critical to the nation's development, and you have the president who doubles as the Minister of Petroleum Resources, and we know that that is not his area of competence. So why first wouldn't you have somebody who has years upon his or her belt that has capacity to be able to do what has to be done? So for a Kyari, in assessing, for instance, him particularly how he has driven the petroleum sector, then I think it's a null and null for me. That is my own position.
All right. So
then if you also
pardon me.
Yes, please.
Tomorrow, the president is expected to deliver another Independence Day address to Nigerians. So we're just going to take a look at some of what he said at the last Independence Day speech. So if I could just quote some parts of that address by the president on the 63rd Independence Day anniversary, which was on the 1st of October 2023. He says,
yes, please.
At my inauguration, I made important promises about how I will govern this great nation. Among those promises were pledges to reshape and modernize our economy and to secure the lives and liberty and property of the people. I said that bold reforms were necessary to place our nation on the path of prosperity and growth. On that occasion, I announced the end of fuel subsidy. I'm attuned to the hardship that have come. I have a heart that feels and eyes that see. I wish to explain to you why we must endure this trying moment. Those who sought to perpetuate the fuel subsidy and broken foreign exchange policies are people who will build their family mansion in the middle of a swamp. I am different. I am not a man to erect our national home on a foundation of mud. To endure, our home must be constructed on safe and pleasant ground. Fast forward to today.
Thank you.
How does that resonate from your perspective?
If you look at what he talked about, you're talking about the economy of the country and how that resonates. Between then and now, the Naira has been devalued further. For those who perhaps have consistently looked at the aspect of the foreign exchange dynamics, you'd agree with me that there was a particular period, I think that was about 4 or 5 months ago, where the president and people in his cabinet celebrated how the Nigerian currency made certain levels of improvement against the dollar. That was just for about 3 weeks, that the exchange rate came to as much as 800. But sooner had it gotten there than the amount itself came back to about, as of yesterday, I think it's about 1,600 and something in terms of the exchange rate to the dollar. Now, when you talk about the strength of the economy, you have to do the measurement of the strength of your currency before, now, and you do projections, because that is a key part of it. With regard to what you've given to me, Chamberlain, with respect to the economy of the country, it is obvious from the figure I talked about that the country's economy has actually shrunk with regard to the strength of the economy currency-wise. If you also look at the inflationary impact of the economy, between that same period, which was in 2023, and now when the president gave that Independence Day speech, you'd agree with me again, Chamberlain, that, you know, Nigerians and their capacity to have some monies that you describe as a take-home is obviously something they found very difficult to do. So that's another thing. So whenever we measure the economy, we do not just measure the economy based on perhaps the organized private sector or whatever is happening within the organized public sector. Let me use that word now. We look at how much of those things he has talked about, how has this thing, or how many of those things are reflected in the pay power of the people. So you'd agree with me that whilst he talked about bold reforms, and I respect the position of the president regarding his intentions, but the practicability of what your intent has become on paper or with regard to administering anything you have as your policy plan, I tell you, has not actually measured up. And that is why Nigerians are concerned. I actually read one of my friends, Kelechi Deka, and, you know, I have also studied the economies of nations with regard to some of the researches that I've done. No country in the world went so low that there is no single reprieve, even while they're reforming. As difficult as it could be, you can tell me that a country like Singapore went low many years ago, but it did not get to the point where they were practically strangulated in the name of wanting to ensure that the economy resurges. And that is an aspect for me that I believe the president has to look at. Economic reforms is fundamental, especially when you have an economy that is import dependent, and when you have an economy also where the basics of your expectations are not put on the paper. Now let's look at a lot of countries of the world. For instance, if you go to New York State, just New York State, or let me say New York City, the electricity generated in New York City alone, not the state, is more than the electricity generated in the entire Nigeria. One of the things that is very pivotal to any functional economy is the aspect of power, because you know that for any business you do, power is primary. Small-scale businesses, medium-scale enterprises, large-scale enterprises, you need power to run it. If you talk about economic reforms and you make us imagine that you expect things like foreign direct investment and you expect people to actually plow their money into your economy, what are the incentivization put in place? Apart from, for instance, you have things that we talk about, okay, tax incentives. What about what you as a country do to ensure that there's a lot of incentives with power? Don't forget that is economic reform. I wouldn't know if you want to take another part of that speech, because there's a portion of that speech that talks about security. And I'm going to also tell you the comparative analysis of what has taken place between that same 2023 and now with regard to the insecurity situation of the country. So if you permit me, you want me to veer into that. Between 2023 and now, you've had a sitting governor and a former governor accuse each other about being complicit with respect to the security or otherwise of the country. When Mr. Matawale was there, do not forget, and I need to remind us here, that if you talk about insecurity in the country, the northwest and the northeastern part of this country, especially as it relates to banditry, kidnapping, and all of the nefarious things being done, these things I'm talking about are prevalent to the extent that they have to give the leader of a kidnapper even a chieftaincy title in Zamfara State. Now, this back and forth brickbat that has been taking place between the former governor of Zamfara and the current governor of Zamfara is indicative of the many other things that are happening under the leadership of this administration that you'd expect the president to have taken decisive steps. Excuse me, on your channel's television in 2018, you had a naval officer who came on top. I think I'm trying to remember his name. That was August of 2018, I beg your pardon. He came on air and told us that The government has a lot of information in its possession regarding the people that are making a mess of Nigeria. And the same government over time has not been able to demonstrate that it has the guts to use all of the instrumentality of force to uproot those that are actually killing many Nigerians themselves. So you find out that between when that speech was given and now, the president of the country has in his possession over 400 names given to its administration by the previous administration about the people that are sponsoring terrorism in the country. And between then and now, he has given the speech. He has told us that he's committed to the security of the country. Yet you have over 400 names in your possession. The Kuje prison is another example, Chamberlain. What is the current situation with the other persons that they should? I know that they put a particular wanted list out with pictures, but between that time and now, what are the things that we've done with regard to the Kuje prison that was also attacked? So if we want to look back, we won't want to talk about what is going to tell us tomorrow. We'll talk about the things that the president should have actually taken care of with regard to security or otherwise in this country. Chamberlain, just imagine for a moment that some people came and overran your prison at the nation's capital. You don't have a single footage. You don't have a single thing that you probably, because you exchange fires, to have actually dealt with the people who attacked the prison. And it appears as if Nigerians are looking the other way. Chamberlain, I refuse to look the other way because certain things are obvious and people refuse to talk about it. So between 2023 and now, what has happened basically to those that were supposed to have, exchanged fires with those who attacked the Kuje prisons? What has happened to the officers on duty? What were the things we saw at Kuje prison that showed that truly it was not an organized overrunning of a national prison? That's another information for you here, Chamberlain. So when you look at speeches being given, we have to look at what has happened before the speech, during the speech, after the speech, and what is the disposition of the current leadership to taking care of that.
Very important questions that you've raised there, Mr. Kano, and I believe that those are questions that mustn't be swept under the carpet. And I think that this issue of this controversy now prevailing between Bobrisky, VDM, etc.
Yes,
we want to believe that that issue will certainly make it to the fore again, because recently prisons, the correctional facilities have now come under scrutiny. I think quite a number of officers were excused from their duty post just last week through a statement released by the minister or the minister's office, that particular department. But you've raised a number of other important issues with regards to the economy. You've raised the issue of electricity. And interestingly, just looking at the front page of Vanguard newspapers this morning, the Minister of Power is speaking about how over 40% of Nigerians now enjoy 20 hours of electricity. I do not know. I'm reporting what's on the front page of the paper. But if you have to ask me, as a Nigerian, as somebody who is living in this country and who now has to pay through her nose for electricity because certain bans were introduced. I do not know if you were privy to the controversy that raised when we're told that in certain areas certain investments have been made, and they believe that they can supply at least 20 hours of electricity, 20 hours plus electricity to certain areas, and they believe that they need to pay the market price of electricity. So a number of people are now paying as much as 200 Naira, if not more, per kilowatt hour, which was over 300% increase in electricity tariff, which a number of Nigerians are currently shouldering. Now, what the minister's statement means is that about 40% of Nigerians may perhaps now be on that band A area and may be paying that much. I think it's up to, we can conduct a poll to find out if they're actually getting value for money. But in the area where I live, I can say that, well, there's been some improvement in the area of electricity. The question is whether it is going to the productive sector, to the manufacturers. Are they also feeling that? That's the answer. That's the question I cannot give an answer to. Because that's the area that is really critical. We need electricity to facilitate production. we need electricity
Okay.
for manufacturing. So in that regard, would you say that you really have a very fair assessment of what is going on there?
Mark, wait, let me tell you here, and I need to say this clearly, that I feel insulted, really, especially because I'm talking from the US. With every sense of humility, I've had the privilege of interacting with very wonderful minds here. And but for the kind of human being that God has made me, I think if I didn't have the privilege of a little bit of, let me be very euphemistic, if to say I knew finished primary school, I would not have been able to hold my own and hold it very strong when I'm talking to people about my country. I would have been a very poor example of the kind of quality that Nigeria gives. But we're grateful to God for his privileges. In the place where I live, Malkwe, I am not on band W or K or F or Z. There is no band that exists. When I step out of my door each morning, I switch off the power controls and my electricity remains intact. When we're talking about improving the kind of infrastructure we have, why is it difficult at times for people to accommodate the trends that are functional? Let's go back to the Goodluck Jonathan administration and the unbundling of the electricity sector. Something that is as critical as electricity was to be done, and nobody thought that it was important for us to actually hand over that sector to those who have capacity. Some of the people we know that are part of those who own the respective distribution companies, quite frankly, are those within the corridors of power, in alignment with some other people. And many of these people, for instance, do not even have an inkling about how the power sector works. As a matter of fact, I need to remind you that you should remember here that after the unbundling of the power sector, the federal government of Nigeria had to give money to the people that were supposed to come with their money to handle or take over the electricity units of the country, because I've never seen it anywhere. A private investor supposedly came into your electricity sector and said, we want to do business, we know how to handle it. And having unbundled and handed it over to them, you now took money again from those who perhaps might not have completely paid you for the unbundling, and you gave money to them again to start the business. So that is a kind of business system that I'm still trying to understand. That's one part. I do not understand how you could... Yes, you wanted to say something, please? Or do I continue?
Well, I actually just want to add a question to this, Mr. Kano, and that is to help us understand the difference and how we should be approaching this. There's a difference between the word leader and leadership. So most of the time when we talk about the leadership of a nation or a state or any environment, we're talking about not just one person. We're talking about a group of people. But then most of the time it will seem like the attention is always on one individual, the leader. So, and that can be deceptive because people would wonder, how come this fellow is not doing anything when in the reality, it's way beyond that individual, that particular individual. Every time one is talking about the federal government of Nigeria doing this or that, always forgetting that there are 36 states and officially 774 local governments and their chairmen and the governors and the states with their governors. So when we talk about the leadership of a nation, shouldn't we be looking at a whole set of people as opposed to just focusing on one person? Because without collaboration, we can't have the kind of leadership we want.
All right, let me remind you that there's a common saying, everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, if you check the great organizations of this world, let me take, for instance, let me take Microsoft, for instance. You'd agree with me that over the years, Bill Gates, who leads the light of the organization, despite having a lot of persons that work with him, has been able to reinvent the organization and reinvent himself as far as the technology sector of the world is concerned. Now, you cannot take away the fact that the body language, the policy direction, the determination, the acumen, the deliberateness of the person who is at the center of a particular administration is pivotal. If you check great democracies of the world, now I want to talk about civil rights activism in a country like the United States of America. When Martin Luther King led the march from, Selma to Montgomery in Alabama, you'd agree with me that there were other persons who marched with him. But what resonated there was the nonviolence principle that he enunciated and the fact that people were able to see him as the epitome of that, despite other person, and they followed suit. The president of the country is at the center of the leadership of the country, regardless of the PDP, APC, Labour dichotomies that we have. But do not also forget that within the past 25 years, we've had party members cross from one party to the other. It seems as if they are all in the same area and they can decide to choose nomenclatures over time. We have all other persons leading, but what is the body language of this country? Now, why do we refer, for instance, to the nationalists of this country? It's simply because they embody the kind of leadership, the kind of vision, the kind of mission that we should and hope to have. And that's why we refer to them. And it is key for us to understand that the person himself who leads will always give us the indication of the direction. Let's look at the former president of
just 1 second on that one, Mr. Kano, because we really do need to, if you can hear me, just 1 second, if you can hear me, we need to go. But just to be clear, you said everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, it's not just one person from what you've said, it's a whole load of people. So it speaks to, first of all, what should be the core. The individual is, the leader is, yes, I hear you. But then what's the direction? Is there a national vision? Is there a national ethos that everyone in leadership has to answer to, as opposed to depending on just one person's body language?
Good. That is very correct also. Now, having come to terms with the fact that there's somebody who is at the center of the leadership, the people also have a role to play to ensure that the person who represents them at a subnational level, aligns with something that is general to positivity in respect of political representation, as in the context of this conversation. So when you have governors, for instance, who perhaps are from different parties and they do not model their style of leadership after what perhaps the person at the center is doing, then you're going to have disparity of outcomes. And that is where the problem is. So you cannot take away from a central vision that becomes the tracking path for every other person that comes on board with regard to moving the country in this instance forward. So the expectation placed, at the foot of the person who is at the center is also the same expectation for those at the subnational level. And that is why for everybody, for instance, who is a minister with this administration, it is key for them to know that whatever it is that the person does, who is the number one man, they will also be looking to see how much of that is assessed in their performances. I had said it on one of the platforms I was, that's about a week ago, that you cannot take away the role, for instance, of civil servants and those within the organized private sector from the accumulation of the aggregate of success that is expected of anybody who occupies any position in government or outside government. So it therefore means that for us, the national vision and the consciousness of being patriotic in moving the country forward, one way or the other becomes the mantra for everybody to follow. We're talking about Singapore the last time. What did Lee Kuan Yew do?
Mr.
Do you know that even in
Singapore,
you cannot even put your spittle on the road? It's because there's an embodiment of rightness.
There's a lot that has been said, Mr. Kano, and that example has been cited quite a number of times, and a number of people have also cited even Japan and China and a number of other places. But the question is, where do we get that national ethos from, and when? Unfortunately, that question can't be answered at this time. Thank you so much for your time. Adeni Kano,
I want to say thank you too for having me. Thank you too. Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. Yeah.
So we take a break. When we return, Business Morning on Sunrise Daily is next.
Oh, hello and welcome to the last trading day of September, last trading day of the third quarter of 2024 right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Let's get to the top markets that set your agenda now. We'll see for oil markets, last week it was a negative close for the week. We see Brent was down about 3%. Closing Friday's trade at $71.89 a barrel. Then WTI had a bigger drop there, 5% down for the week at $68.18. But fast forward to today, we're seeing an upgrade there with price. We're seeing a jump there for Brent and WTI. That's for today's prices, 0.71%, $72.49 a barrel. WTI crude, 0.68%, $68.61. And we know it's still geopolitics right there driving sentiment. Last week, it was all about supply concerns. We know there was oversupply expected into the market. We know when there's too much supply of a product, we see that prices actually go down. So that's what we saw last week. But starting today, we're seeing geopolitics in the Middle East playing to the prices today. To the FX market, we see the Naira gained on Friday after a volatile week. It was up about 2.24%, but the Naira was down for the week about over 1% for the week. NAFEX 1,668, that was down 0.22%. But we know in the parallel market is farther away, from these prices, but we still see volatility even for the whole quarter of this third quarter in 2024. To other stories now, we see Boa Foods PLC announced a 74.4% increase in revenue, reaching 729 billion naira for the financial year 2023, up from its 2022 revenue. This growth was highlighted by the chairman of the company, Mr. Abdul Samad Rabiu, at the company's third annual general meeting in Abuja. Mr. Rabiu says despite prevailing economic challenges, Boa Foods has demonstrated resilience with earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortization, that's EBITDA, surging 83.6%. Take a listen.
This is the third annual general meeting of Boa Foods PLC, and the chairman of the company is leading other members of the management and shareholders at the meeting. The meeting is to lay the report to the directors, statement of financial position as at 31 December 2023, together with a statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income for the year ended 31 December 2023.
So it's a business that I am, very, very passionate about.
Riding on the success of the report, the management plans to create more visibility for the company's products with a plot to be the largest producer of pasta in the country.
A few days ago, we signed a contract with a company, called Fava of Italy to expand the pasta, milling in Port Harcourt. And we are going to have 9 additional lines of 6 tons per hour, each line per hour, so total of 400,000 tons per annum. And that, I think, signing represents probably the largest single, investment as far as pasta milling is concerned.
The shareholders had an interactive session with the management, and one issue that dominated the conversation is a plea for the management of the company to provide scholarships for their children.
Madam Obidei raised the issue of, the company supporting the children of shareholders. I believe that is important and is something that I think the company should, consider. So we'll discuss internally to see how we can support that. And I know Mrs. Bakari also mentioned, apart from the employment, also see if we can grant some scholarships to the children of our shareholders. So I think that is something that we should consider.
Mr. Rabiu, who is presiding over the meeting, moves a motion to adopt the recommendation of the directors and also approve the recommended dividend for shareholders for the close of business for the year 2023.
I hereby move a motion to adopt the recommendation of the directors and approve the recommended dividend of 5 Naira 50 kobo per one ordinary share of 50 kobo, amounting to a total dividend of 99 billion Naira to be paid to shareholders whose names appear in the company's register of members at the close of business on the 23rd August 2023. Can we have somebody to please second the motion?
The company attributes the success achieved in a year to effective management and leveraging opportunities.
The company is very efficient, and we made, 99 billion Naira profit, or 100 billion Naira, I think, profit, dividend of 99 billion last year. That is because of the efficiency of the business, as I mentioned earlier. And also, in fact, it would have been more than that if we had, decided to follow, what other companies were doing by increasing prices. So we decided deliberately, to maintain, lower prices. Boa Foods products are still the cheapest today.
Our journey to date has been that of joy for us, because we have kept very fully to our commitment in terms of our strategies, basically centered around expansion. And these expansions are basically for food manufacturing platforms to provide possibilities for us to supply more food into the Nigerian market. This we have done very successfully with the launch of our new factories in Port Harcourt for the flour and the pasta divisions. We also commercialized our rice divisions also in Kano. And so what that's done basically is also to present us the opportunity to expand and diversify our scalability business, as it were. So today, as it stands, as we also say, we have consistently deliver value to our stakeholders in line with our commitment. And of course, we do know very clearly that playing in this economy, it comes with a lot of volatility, but we continue to sustain resilience as a business.
The company is committing to supporting the federal government and Nigerians by contributing to the moderation of food prices in the country.
And as major central bankers begin cutting interest rates, experts hope this would make available affordable credit for countries and businesses. But a major issue impacting Africa is credit ratings. And according to Africa Development Bank President, Mr. Akinwumi Adesina, credit rating biases to Africa need to be eliminated. He made the comment at the concluded 79th UN General Assembly. Take a listen.
The future we are in today was the past. The future we build for tomorrow must be based on better decisions taken today. Building that future for Africa requires more than reform of the global financial architecture. We need new institutional support systems to build a more solid and resilient future for Africa. First, we must tackle the biases in the current global credit rating systems that leads to higher costs of accessing capital for Africa than other parts of the world. The establishment of the Africa Credit Rating Agency, called for by the African Union, is critical to achieving this. Second, the global financial system does not protect Africa from contagious effects of global financial shocks. Africa is the only region of the world without a financial safety net. That's why it's critical to establish the African Financial Stability Mechanism to provide safety net for Africa. Third, we must address risks facing Africa in leveraging greater private sector financing. That's why the African Development Bank is pulling all its guarantee instruments into an African Insurance and Guarantee Agency that will deploy risk instruments at scale to bring more investments to Africa. Fourth, we must tackle the rising insecurity in Africa, the rising expenditures on security, which are displacing financing for development. To achieve this, the African Development Bank is working with the African Union to establish security index investment bonds that will be used to tackle the reconstruction of areas damaged by conflicts. And finally, Africa's vast forests, biodiversity, and carbon sinks are the key for saving the world. It is time to properly value the green assets of Africa and include that in the GDP of Africa. Africa must move from being green and cash poor to being green rich through proper valuation of its natural capital in its GDP. These foundations will assure a much richer and wealthier Africa for future generations. They will build wealthier and a more resilient Africa and move it into a future with sound financial structures to bolster its development. The future is Africa's, and we will take it on boldly.
Right, as this trading month, winds down, September and the third quarter has been a roller coaster for the Naira and the stock market. But we see the stock market for the month up by 1.9% at 98,458 points. That's for the all-share index for the stock market. But for the quarter, it's down about 1.6%. Then for the Naira, we see the Naira is down 2.12%. That's for the third quarter of 2024. It started at 1,508 Naira, and for September, that's last Friday, 1,514 Naira. So it's down about 2.12%. But who knows, maybe some kind of big jump could come in the trading session today. We'll definitely find out, even though this was a month that we had the 50 basis points rate hike. But joining me now to unpack all of this, we have Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO, Finance with Mukhtar, joining me right here in the studio. Great to have you. Good morning.
It's a pleasure.
So it's definitely been an interesting third quarter, for the market and for the Naira. But we see they're both down. When you look at it from the quarter basis. But for the month. Not so bad. Not so bad. For the equities market. But I want to drill down on the Naira now. We saw a 50 basis points rate hike in this month. So it's been hike after hike. Even in the third quarter, but we're still seeing that pressure, on the Naira. And, some will say, if you look at most of the problems we have right now, from, rising prices to the price of PMS, some say it's because of the Naira, at this point. If the Naira was strong, we might not be having to pay so much.
Definitely.
How are you seeing that?
I totally agree with them. We did two very, very critical restructuring of our economy. Immediately Mr. President came in. The floating of the Naira was one of those very, very strong economic policy, and by and by the removal of subsidy, even if now we realize that that subsidy didn't actually go. But again, those were two very, very big policy that were taken without having the structural foundation, and we saw the Naira move. I think for me, the greatest mistake they made was moving the Naira to convert at 960 and then move it to 1,400. And after that, the Naira has not recovered. By the time it got to 1,900. Now, all that is basically trying to make the Naira, make the market more interesting to attract foreign portfolio investors. And really, they have not really come in like that because nobody wants to come in an unstable currency market, volatility here and there. I think the CBN is doing everything possible to see how they can track FX. And I think for the first time, or maybe for the second time, the CBN is beginning to look, the challenge with the Naira, the challenge with inflation is not just that mopping up liquidity, hiking the rate. You could do all that, but if you don't bring that stability in the exchange rate, you'll just be playing around the corner. Because what we've seen is that, like you said, if you look at importation, today is 1,600, tomorrow is 1,500. President came up that, look, our food inflation is high because over 70% of what we consume we definitely import. Mr. President came out with that policy of removal of tariff. And then we saw that tariff removal up to this moment, we've not seen it really take off because Ministerial of Finance, the custom are waiting for Ministerial of Finance. So for 2 months now, we've not really categorically said that policy have really taken off. So to stabilize the Naira, they come up with a rate hike now. But if you look at all the rate hike, it's towards making the fixed income space very, very more interesting to attract foreign investors, the kind of return. Just on Friday, they did the OMO auctioning at 23.something%. You can't beat it anywhere. When you have that, you will want to attract more liquidity into the system. And thank God the United Nations General Assembly, we saw that deal about $10 billion coming in. Hopefully it will come in. We saw the deal of Nigerian bottling company say they will invest $1 billion. Let's forget that they told us that before and it didn't happen. Hopefully it will happen. So the Naira will keep on struggling as the fundamental issue of the Naira is liquidity. Like the CBN governor said, we need to up our oil production.
So is liquidity is not some kind of deliberate devaluation of the Naira?
No. Initially, it was tactical devaluation, not deliberate devaluation, knowing that, okay, after that you attract more inflow. But unfortunately, it didn't work. And it didn't work because there was no liquidity. It didn't work because you don't leave your currency to market forces. Market forces would always take advantage of your currency. You need to strike a balance, because as it stands today, I can categorically say, like all international organizations have said, confidently say that the Naira is undervalued. It shouldn't be exchanging at about 1,500 with all the parameters that we have. But again, when market forces have to determine your exchange rate, without you having the war chest, what they call the liquidity, to really come in and intervene and balance that space, then you continue to have that challenge. Now, the challenge with the market, I keep saying, is not in the NAF autonomous market. That's not the challenge with the market. The willing buyers, because you get the high trade in there, 10 billion, 10 million, 20 million. You
can see what's playing out in the parallel market at this point.
It's the parallel market, the retail side of the parallel market. We have not been able to stabilize that space, whereby you have those come in to collect 1,000, to collect 5,000, to collect 3,000, to collect 10,000. The demand is high in that place and the supply is low. So CBN intervening, giving Bureau de change 5 at a decision of 1,590. You could always see when those things happen, you normally see that the Naira tend to be a little bit balanced in the parallel market. So that tells you that the challenge of the market is actually from the retail angle. So we need to create stability in the retail angle so that people more confidently want to do their exchange rate through the bank and then go through the willing buyer, willing seller market. As it stands now, people are looking at slimness measures, especially the SMEs. So the challenge with the Naira still has to do with liquidity, and that liquidity needs to be addressed in the retail sector.
All right, so, looking at, segments of the economy, we have the government, we have people, we have investors, we have, private sector. Looking at all of them now, which segment profits from a lower or a Naira that's lost so much strength?
Well, if you look at it now, we look at results, we look at companies, we realize that the financial sector seems to be the one that really gained from that. We saw the oil sector will really gain from it, thinking that the removal of subsidy will make big-time players want to bring in, and then market forces determine the price. But at the start, it wasn't competitive because the Nigerian Petroleum Corporation (NNPC) still remained the sole importer of petroleum products. So we didn't see that happen. But the financial sector seems to be the one that really benefited from it. If you look at the results that have come in, exchange rate revaluation, all other sectors have really suffered. You look at the communication sector, you look at the industrial sector, you look at the consumable sector, you realize that they are having huge losses because of the exchange of money. But when you look at the financial sector, especially the banking sector, they seem to make a lot of progress in that side. But again, you need to look at that progress is relative, because you see those revaluation, you see those non-interest income going up, you see, but you see this expensive going up, such inexpensive. And also you see the impairment charges going up, non-performing loans. So what do you think they gain one place, they tend to lose it in the other space. So but it's more pronounced in the conglomerate. MTN losing billions, Nestle losing billion, Unilever shareholders from completely wipe up. We saw also, you look at Nigerian Brewery, shareholders from almost completely wipe up. They are coming for the right issue. Right. You see Guinness also struggling. You see most of these big-time companies, pharmaceutical companies, they're struggling. They were the ones that gained during the COVID-19 pandemic. But if you look at their results, they are struggling because crops are becoming more expensive. Nigerians are looking for alternative ways to take care of themselves. The Nigerian health insurance scheme is not covering over 90% or 70% of Nigerians. So everybody seems to be looking for means to have alternative means of medication. So that sector is also not booming. So a lot of challenges. I think the only sector that really gained from this tactical revaluation, if you look at it via the result, I think is the banking sector. If you look at it via investment now, I think the oil and gas sector seems to be leading that with the recent 10 billion that is coming in, a lot of big-time players selling up their offshore for Nigerian company, onshore for Nigerian company. That is good. That means Nigerians are beginning to take ownership of that sector.
Right. But we keep talking about liquidity. That's keeping the Naira on the losing, streak at this point. But looking at the last administration, the economic managers from the last administration into this administration, would you say they're really taking the Naira seriously?
Well, if you look at the last administration, I think they were really the one that brought us to our knees. I must say it with all sincerity. I think the 8 years of President Buhari administration was one of the worst administrations we've ever had economically. There were no synergy. There were intervention by CBN, direct intervention, indirect intervention. We saw liquidity. We saw the removal, the cancelling of that retail sector of the FX market. They didn't replace it with any other. They gave it to the bank. There was round tipping. They took it from the bank. They needed to address it. So it was all about try and error, try and error, try and error, try and error. They were not attracting liquidity for the 8 years of Buhari administration. Foreign direct investment, portfolio investment went to all-time low. So we're now seeing that oil also was at low end at the point where only doing 800,000 barrels per day. The reserve was not made. There were what we gain in terms, what we would have gained in terms, we lose in terms of maintaining that subsidy regime for 8 years. So if you look at it, the Buhari administration was the worst administration economically. Didn't do anything for that. Now Tinubu came in. Yes, I think the first mistake was that May 29 statement, subsidy is gone, without making adequate provision to mitigate our problem, because Nigeria economy is largely driven. It's a petrodollar economy. Our means of transportation, our means of powering, our energy sector, our power sector, our transportation sector. Up till recently that we are seeing the CNG buses. So you realize that singular decision without adequate preparation led to the kind of inflationary pressure that we've never had before. Then came again the floating of the Naira without adequate preparation in terms of having those liquidity to make sure that the Naira is not undervalued. So we saw the Naira moved, and those were two critical decisions.
The Naira losing strength, impacts you and I.
Well,
much more. Those wage earners, at this point, and it also trickles down into inflation.
Because when you deny, because 70% of what we eat, even if you say okay, it's not up to 70%, 40%. The machinery that we use for this production, 40% have been imported, so there's still demand on FX. We don't have a better steel industry in Nigeria whereby you can say those machines can be fabricated here. So there's a lot of pressure on the FX market. Now, at that time, NNPC is our cash cow. Yet NNPC was still subsidizing fuel in one way or the other. So what they think to gain in terms of sell in terms of crude, they lose in terms of refined petroleum product. And then we're waiting for those local refinery, and finally it came. We came with a lot of challenge. You and I know the challenge of NNPC.
The Dangote refinery will be able to buy oil in Naira
from tomorrow. Hopefully.
What will all of this do for the Naira at some point?
I tell you,
what are you expecting for the fourth quarter for the Naira?
Look, I'm very optimistic. If the data, if the data that was given to us by the CBN is anything to go by, if that's the real data that tells you that 40% of the demand for FX is driven largely with the importation of refined petroleum product into this country. So you know what it means when demand 40% drops. Definitely, we should see those huge drop in terms of the exchange rate. 40% pressure off the Naira. That is huge. So that could be the game changer. Like I said, it all depends if the data is right, because you hear the CBN saying that, removal of subsidy could also become a challenge in terms of earning FX. Yes, that's true, because you see now, you remove the subsidy, we now begin to get import Naira. They buy it through Naira, not dollar, to make sure that there's stability, there's availability. That is one. Then you lose in terms of making FX available in your foreign reserve. And then you are not producing so much, because if we're producing like the target price of maybe 1.7 million barrels according to the budget, and then we now know that Dangote has come on, we can up
to about 2.5 million. Then you realize that the difference in between what you will not be having challenging earning effects. But now we are going about 1.4 million barrel as the last time. So you are seeing those challenges that if you have to now give most of it to Dangote for local refinery, then how much do you have to export outside to earn effects? So like the CBN governor said, for us to have that,
the PIA, has, in the part where you have what can go out of the country.
But when most of your
what can be used for domestic refining.
Yes, Ladi, but when most of your crude oil are already tied to debt agreements. Remember that NNPC have done a lot of debt agreement. They are paying to crude oil. You cannot relinge on that. Then the IOC, you have an agreement with the IOC. There are a particular barrel of crude that the IOC have to have. That agreement has been there. Even if they said, okay, you prioritize local refinery. That's what I'm saying. By the time you begin to prioritize local refinery, then you lose in terms of the effects that will come in. Because now you are providing local refinery, you're doing it in Naira. You're not doing it in dollars.
Well, for me.
But the good thing is that the president have also said that you are going to, it's going to be fixed. So that's why I said I'm not too sure, because at today's 30th, maybe before the end of today, we'll have the fixed rate whereby Dangote will be buying the crude, because it's going to be like, okay, you buy in dollar, but you pay in Naira to the fixed exchange rate. Now, let that exchange rate, that's my challenge. Will that exchange rate be the real value of the Naira that the CBN thinks? Because
maybe we should just fix the rate at this point.
No, you see, we know what the exchange rate, like the Naira shouldn't be exchanging more than 1,000 at worst 1,100. Is that the real value of the Naira? Is that what we'll be getting from Dangote? If that is it, then the pressure off the market, and that would drive down the exchange rate. Because now you now realize 40% is gone, and they are paying at 1,000, then demand has gone down by 40%. Definitely, you will begin to see the Naira. But that depends on what is it. If you look at the goods in the tariff sector, when you do the willing buyer, willing seller, that's why you've not been able to address inflation. Now, if you do that and you address inflation, maybe they are buying in Naira now at a fixed rate, and you are now beginning to see the price of gas, the price of PMS comes down. Then you have really tackled inflation.
And we don't need to raise rates anymore.
We don't need to raise rates anymore, because the main challenge, now why are you raising rates? Is because you want the liquidity. You want to attract more foreign investors. Though the CBN, I feel for them, they are between the devil and the deep blue sea, because one, you either want to grow the economy. In growing the economy, you cannot grow the economy with high inflationary rate.
Yeah.
You cannot grow the economy with volatility of the exchange rate. So what do you do?
So it's a really tough balancing act.
Balancing act. So what they did was
sacrificing growth.
Exactly. So for the first time, I think the CBN have really addressed something. The CBN governor realized that the challenge, like I said, is all about exchange rate. So it's now looking at how do we earn liquidity in the system. Once we are able to address the exchange rate, we are indirectly,
then all our problems are gone.
We are indirectly tackling inflation. And once you tackle inflation, growth comes automatically.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Always great having you, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO Finance with Mukhtar. Anything that takes pressure off the Naira, I'm up for it at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great having you.
All right, so that's how it's looking today. We're definitely the final trading day of the month of September. That's the day. We'll find out how that plays out. Then tomorrow we'll have a public holiday. Happy birthday, Nigeria, tomorrow. That's happy independence for all of us. And definitely we hope we stay more independent going forward. I'm Ladi Williams. I hand things over now to the Sunrise Daily team.
Yes, and welcome back. And he's back from UNGA as well, Lalu Akande, joining us here this morning. Good morning. Thank you for coming on.
Good to see you again.
So we shouldn't mix it up with the name of the seasoning.
Oh, wait. That's true.
So please, let's get this clear. It's the United Nations General Assembly, okay? UNGA.
My man wasn't even in the kitchen this morning. So I'm just wondering. But oh dear, what was that all about? I mean, all of those, was that confession palpable? in terms of who and when the VP was going to speak before they eventually sorted it out?
Yeah, it was, because as soon as I arrived in New York, the first hint that I got was that the Nigerian diplomats in the permanent mission had a very challenging time trying to get Nigeria on the day one slot. That was a big deal, you know, and that was before the president said he wasn't going to go. So when I arrived, you know, there was quite a lot of frustration that, oh, look, we've done so much work to make sure that Nigeria gets the slot to speak on Tuesday, which is the day one, and our president is not coming, that we're afraid, you know, if they stick with the protocol rules, then Nigeria will lose that spot. That was the very first thing that I picked up, you know. So among the Nigerian diplomats, you know, and around the United Nations, it was a worry that, you know, Nigeria could lose that slot. And why was that slot important? Prestige. It's prestige, you know. The US president gets to speak on day one. Day one is the beginning of the whole thing. And when you are in international relations, prestige is a big deal. But, you know, to their credit, they managed to put it off. And Vice President Kashim Shettima spoke ahead of no less than 20 presidents.
But what feel did you get about the kind of, is it the kind of respect or how they feel about the country in the Committee of Nations?
Well, look, so the ironic thing is that Nigeria is perceived as a very strong force abroad, you know, regardless of our shenanigans at home, honestly. And it's because of this that kind of a stunt could be pulled by our diplomats at the permanent mission. Now, it's not that people are not aware of our challenges. It's not as if they don't even take advantage of it, you know, when they can. But ultimately, the force of our number and then the level of our contributions over the years in the UN, be it in the area of peacekeeping, even the fight against apartheid, you know, Nigeria was at the center of it. Now, people don't forget that, you know, in a jiffy. So Nigeria is still fairly respected. You can imagine how we will be respected when we get our hearts together indeed. How much more we will be regarded.
Well, you know, it's really sometimes, I think that, you know, you sometimes have to leave home for people to appreciate just what it is that this country wields. And I think that a bit of that is beginning to trickle into social media now, where, you know, you find, it usually comes as a joke of some sort, where you find people maybe just meeting random strangers outside of this country and saying, name how many African countries you know, or, you know, name how many Africans you know, or say you meet a man or a woman and say, if you were to marry an African, what nationality would that person be from? And then you find people saying Nigeria. And these things, you know, small as they might seem, I think that it helps us understand, and young people understand just where our place is in the Committee of Nations. And I think that there are a lot of Nigerians who are out there who are also doing us proud, you know, enough for us to not forget, not to be so caught up in the current challenges that we have. But let's go to the message, which the Vice President pushed, right, you know, over and over again. I think it was my colleague who was talking about yesterday and saying, we've been asking for this same thing for the past how many years? A seat at among the big five, those who wield veto power. And it looks like that conversation comes and goes. But given the current situation of things, I mean, with the wars currently going on between Israel and Gaza, our status, our decision to be non-aligned, to seek peace, so to speak. Do you think that our request to, you know, be among those who hold the permanent five, who hold the veto power, is it anywhere close to being considered, you know, granted anytime soon?
Okay, all right. So let me quickly just back up what you said about some of the small things that make us important. So I had an interaction with a number of Nigerians in the US, and they said to me that there's virtually there is no radio station in the US that don't play Nigerian music every day. You know, that's compelling, just to piggyback on.
Which we shouldn't take for granted.
Yeah, no, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. Like that a few years ago.
It's one of the reasons why they respect us. You know, our music is everywhere. I mean, the guy told me on Inside Sources yesterday, he said that, look, every station in New York, every radio station in New York, they play the latest, music releases from Nigeria. That is a big deal because your country is being sold in a very subtle way and everybody is speaking it. But back to the point about the Security Council. So again, if you want to look at the level of contributions that Nigeria makes, for instance, I'll make a point. In the global in the UN peacekeeping operations, the organization even conceded the chairmanship of the committee that handles peacekeeping to Nigeria forever. So they know, even in terms of the sacrifices of men, over the years, and resources, Nigeria is there.
Please say that again for those who missed it.
Oh yeah,
reiterate it.
Yeah, in the peacekeeping Nigeria, they concede leadership to Nigeria for the peacekeeping over the years. So I mean, everybody knows that. Look, if you're going to give it to one person, it's going to be Nigeria. But guess what? It's not going to be easy because look, Kigali, the president,
Rwanda.
Kigali of Rwanda, is already saying that. Look,
Kagame's,
thank you. I say that look, we have to rotate it. We just can't give it to one person, and there are other contenders. So it's not going to be easy, but it will be difficult. If we get 2 African permanent seats and Nigeria doesn't get it, will be very difficult. But we still have to do a lot of work. And that includes for the president to appoint an ambassador. If he doesn't want to appoint an ambassador to all of the places, because I understand they say there are financial constraints, there are key places in this world where our ambassadors should be sitting down.
Career ambassadors.
Well, I mean, I think that we should give some credit to those guys. They pulled the stunts in New York. I mean, they are career diplomats. They're not even been named as an ambassador. It's like they're just the diplomats who are there, but they have experience. They're the UN. They are in New York, so they work together. They pull off a stunt of having a vice president speak ahead of. I can read out the list because I had to go back and look at how many presidents spoke after Shetima. No less than 20. No, that is not small at all.
And that's a super big deal.
It is a super big deal, in a place where everybody wants to be the first one, want to get there on the first day. So maybe the president will begin to look at this issue of naming ambassadors, because if we really want to get this seat, we need an ambassador in New York. We need an ambassador in Washington, D.C. We need an ambassador in London. We need an ambassador. We need this. There are key places, even in Africa, that we should have an ambassador. Even if you don't want to do the all over 100, do like 10 of key places so that we can get in on the game much earlier. So I think that it will be very difficult, if there are 2 seats on the permanent on the permanent membership at the Security Council and Nigeria doesn't get it. But that doesn't mean that we don't have work to do. We have a lot of work to do because there are also very strong resistance.
Is this just some carrot they've been dangling, in front of other countries? This permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. I mean, it looks like a carrot that's been dangling since forever. Okay, look, we have a few seats we're considering. If any one of you is good enough, good boy, good girl, as the case might be, we might consider. Hasn't this carrot been dangling for way too long?
You're right, Mark. As a matter of fact, so the Americans have come on board eventually, and that's part of what has given the momentum. Americans have said, okay, you know what, we're going to concede to having 2 seats for Africa on the permanent seat. But they even say, no, they will be there as permanent members, but they won't wield
veto power. So what is the point in that?
Exactly. And Nigerians are saying, no. Look,
what's the point?
What's the point?
We spectators.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So that we'll just be here to vote, and you guys, so you're right. At times it may be like a dangling carrot, but it's been on forever. And we have to credit the current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, for really rising up to the occasion and saying that, look, it's not okay not to have African seat on permanent seat. I tried to push the question to his spokesperson last week and say that will the Secretary General, will he, besides him just saying that that Africa should get the seat, that Africa should also get the veto power. Well, the man was a little bit careful because, you know, you don't want to offend the Americans, you know, in the UN. Not only are they the highest contributors in the finances, you know, the UN is hosted in New York. But I think that if Africans insist that, look, it's either you give it to us or you don't, you know, we do have the voice. And the General Assembly, which is where all the countries are represented, there is no way the General Assembly, if the General Assembly has a voice in this, that you won't have the veto powers.
I think it's something they should push. I mean, after all, if they keep pushing diversity all over the world, and then you should open up that space as well. And allow things change. It's change with the times. Let's bring it back home. Right. Did the president dangle the carrot when he said there'll be cabinet reshuffle? Or should he have just done
like that. Yeah, I mean, I think that he should have done it. You know, because it seemed to be becoming even overdue. The boss in this town was that he wanted everybody, all of them, to have 1 year. You know, and most of them took over sometimes in August. You know, and in August it was already 1 year. Now September is gone. You know, so I would have thought that you should have just done it because of the two things: the severity of the problems you are dealing with and the urgency. You know, but hey, it's okay that he has said that. Look, you guys. What are you guys doing? I mean, it's even interesting that the president is saying that you guys are not talking about what is happening. That is that is an indictment on the ministers. I mean, you know, how can you be a minister, a federal minister in this country, and people don't know what you are doing? I mean, if you go through the list, we have about almost 40. You know, how many of them can you remember at the top of your finger that say that, you know, immediately you can say that, okay, that guy? Very few.
Before you tell us why that might be the case, I understand that some of them actually don't have any capex, no capital expenditure to some offices, and as such, there's little or nothing many of them can do. Is that tenable for you?
Well, okay, good. So, and this is where, you know, the experience of serving comes in. Look, there will always be the struggle for resources. Always, you know, and I remember quite a number of meetings where, you know, our principals will say to guys when they complain and say that, you know, we don't have enough money. Say, no, you have to be innovative. You have to be innovative. Look, the amount of money that is available in this country, is our GDP it runs into 100 trillion. So the money is there. It may not be in government. You may not have as much as you hope to have. But there must be a way that you bring the government and the private sector together to get things done. Look at what South Africa is doing. So South Africa has its own agency, which is close to our whole national orientation. You know what they call it? Brand South Africa. That's what they call it. And it is being heavily funded by the private sector. If you look at their budgets, you know, one of my guests yesterday at Inside Sources said to me that, look, the budget of Brand South Africa is at times is even close to that of another country. And that is possible because they don't depend only on the government resources. They also depend on private sector funding. A lot of our ministries, a lot of the ministers have assignments and responsibilities that can dovetail public and private sector. That's where the idea of PPP comes in. So people should be more creative. And this is the point. The president also should understand that Nigeria is at a situation where you don't pick people who are ministers who are trying to just figure out things. We don't have that luxury, Mr. President. You got to get people who have the experience and who have the innovative, transformative mind. That's how to deal with this problem.
I was going to say, shouldn't the president be leading by example? Because here we are, how many years into his administration? Yes, over a year now. We did a year in May 20...
16 months now.
Yeah. And the president hasn't granted an interview. I mean, yes, it's done broadcast, but broadcasts do not equate to interviews, do they?
That's
the ministers tell him that.
They should be telling him, the Minister for Information should be telling him that, Mr. Bayo Ononuga should be telling him that it's important to hold yourself accountable to journalists, you know, or have an interaction where people can ask you questions. It's very important, and I think, I mean, he should do it. I don't see any reason. I mean, if Wike is doing it, you know, the president is far more articulate than Wike. If Wike can sit in front of the press and say, you guys ask me any question live about, come on.
Is it becoming a party thing? Because the last president didn't attend any of those debates. And
didn't attend or didn't... He granted 2 interviews in 8 years.
Just 2.
Just two.
And I think that's that's laughable, you know. And I understand that he's very taciturn, you know, worked in his administration. You know, I think that's one of the things that I find incredible. That, look, you cannot lead a country as big as Nigeria, as diverse as Nigeria, and you don't talk to them in such a way that they can ask you questions. Look, the president of Nigeria is such a very powerful office. I don't see any reason why you can't take a question. You are the last man. I mean, the buck stops at your table. You know, I mean, it's a different thing if somebody is a minister and they will say, oh, well, I don't want to say this. I don't want to hurt the president. I don't want to but the president is the president. You call the shots. Yeah. You know, I don't see any reason why you should not, on a regular basis, be taking questions from the press and from the Nigerian people.
Well, thank you. Perhaps one of the issues to also look at here, Mr. Akande, is the responsibility of the citizens. There are those who have said that we should follow the money. There are those who always go back and forth and saying, look, the ministers, you know, this is what they do and that is what they do. But what is the role of the people in this? I'm not just talking about the press. Every minister came from a state, anointed or appointed or selected by the state. So is there a role for governments, for the citizens? And how do you think we should approach things here as a people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a very important point that you made, Hayo. I'm aware, for instance, that retired Major General Ishola Williams, you know, I'm sure that, you know, many Nigerians will remember him. He was the general that resigned from the military after Abacha took over in 1993. You know, a pro-democracy general, some of the people that stood for June 12. And he said to me, when he came on Inside Source, he said, look, Nigerian followers are also responsible. They're also responsible. You know, I mean, if the followers don't organize themselves, if the followers don't fulfill their own obligations, then it's going to be difficult to have the kind of the desired governance and the nation that we have. And I think he is leading an effort, and we're working together on trying to develop a plan and a program for Nigerians as followers to understand their responsibilities. And he calls it the followership lab. And he has started with the University of Ilorin, as a matter of fact, to develop this concept. So you're right. It's important for us as followers to understand the responsibility that followers ought to fulfill, the kind of things that followers should be doing, the kind of leadership they should accept, how they should hold the feet of leaders to the fire, and how they themselves as followers, we ourselves as followers, must also have a moral superiority. You see, because if you don't have a moral superiority, which is where we are as a nation today, those leaders, they came out from among the followers. And so we have the challenge as a people to try and resolve the declining values. You know, some of our values have declined over the years. Many people say that it's because of what military government has done. But hey, it's now 25 years of civil rule. We need to begin to address these issues. So I agree with you that followers also have a huge responsibility. We must begin to organize and dictate the terms of leadership. And followers do have the power. Over 200 million people. The people who are in the governance of this country, put together, all the states, federal government, local government, is not up to 1,000 or probably 2,000, certainly less than 5,000. And you have over 200 million of us. It's a question of organization.
You know, one of the things that we understand that the president will be, you know, unveiling or, you know, tomorrow or sometime not too far from now is the identity program. And of course, we know that the orientation agency, particularly from the Minister of Information and National Orientation, has been talking about the values charter, national values charter for some time. But we can't also deny that trust is greatly depleted. People always look at people in leadership positions before they can take a cue. So what's the hope that you see for the identity program that the government is talking about, as well as that national values charter, in the light of huge distrust and humongous governance deficit, as some people believe.
Yeah. So on the question of trust, yes, there is a huge gap between the government and the people. Now, Nigeria's situation is not very peculiar, although the gap, here might be, wider than elsewhere. And the way to resolve that issue of trust is for government and people in governance to lead by example. So, for instance, the government is saying, look, things are difficult. There's hardship in the land. We have to take tough decisions. We have to remove the subsidy, because we have to save money. And Nigerians say, okay, we get that. But if Nigerians don't see the government leaders also cutting costs, also tightening their belt, then they cannot trust what is being said. If Nigerians see the government continue spending lavishly and government leaders living ostentatiously, they cannot trust what is being said. So when we talk about trust, a lot of it depends on those who lead. They must lead by examples. If they show Nigerians that we are living by what we are saying, I guarantee you that it will not be difficult for Nigerians to trust and follow.
But then it's just it's not just one person. My apologies, Chimberlain. It's not just one person here. We're talking about not just the federal government here. We're talking about state governments as well. And it will seem like, on the one hand, it's easier for us to hold the feet of the president and federal agencies to the fire as opposed to those in the states.
I agree. I agree with you entirely. And we have to talk even more about those governors, because a lot of the real governance happens in the state. So you are entirely correct. We need to hold the feet of the governors to the fire. And now the chairman of the local governments who will be getting the money directly, we need to hold their feet to the fire too. Absolutely.
Okay. Unfortunately, we cannot hold your feet to the fire, but what will the president say tomorrow? Because we just looked at one of his speeches, the last one, for instance, but I guess we'll see. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Let's look at some messages that's come from you. Victor says, I agree with Mark Weda. Better days are ahead. It took Israel 430...
Yes,
Victor, how about 430 years to leave Egypt as free people. According to the book of Exodus, better days will surely come. I pray it will be in his lifetime. Well, that's
says I pray it's in my lifetime. So I'm going to personalize that as well. I think that's what we're all working for, that we pray it's in our lifetime. But at least, even if it's not in our lifetime, let us leave something that our children can also enjoy. Philip Ortese is talking about Ministry of Petroleum. He says, I think the president is experienced enough to double as a Minister of Petroleum. He's been in the business for many years. What more experience can one require? However, is it not too much a responsibility to manage the nation and subsets of it at the same time? That's a critical question.
Well, I guess that there will be answers coming from appropriate quarters. Festus Akinboyewa has this. As we celebrate 64 years of our independence, it's time for true federalism, where every constituent part is allowed to enjoy autonomy and sovereignty. States must be allowed to control their resources and have their own police. This is the only way Nigeria can develop rapidly as a nation.
And then this is from Chigozie. He says, I really wonder if Nigerians will ever have the Nigeria of our dream. It is very sad that our leadership opted to slaughter our economy and impoverish Nigerians for selfish reasons. How do we celebrate our 64th anniversary on an empty stomach? I know.
How it feels sometimes.
We're asking the same question.
Well, I have a theme for this year. I will not sell my children hopelessness. That's my theme for this year.
I think my own theme is that I'll let you know when I come up with it. Anyway, so don't worry about it. Well, that is it today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you tomorrow, which is it's Independence Day tomorrow.
Independence Day, yes. We said pre-independence, so.
Yeah. So we'll hope that you have a happy Independence Day anniversary. Goodbye.
And a productive week as well. I mean, I know there's a holiday tomorrow, but we still hope that the week will be productive. Thank you for watching. I'm Malkwe Yusuf.
Well, my own ethos, Malkwe, is Nigeria go survive. Akande, do have a beautiful day.